Then the other kind of family is the Neptunian family. So Uranus, Sun, Neptune, here I'm connecting Neptune with the Moon. So we can see how the mother-father figures, the Sun and the Moon, are kind of behind the scenes in these two dynamics. Here we have the opposite situation, where we feel more protected and more prepared if we're part of a unit which is really closed off and doesn't really want to allow outside forces to be intervening in the dynamic of the family very much. These are those traditional families where it's not very popular to have a different opinion or to be having a separate voice or to be kind of expressing an idea, wanting to bring in something from outside, unless it is perceived that this is going to be for the common good, for the good of everyone else. And in these families there are very many set models. If we look at the charts, and this can be a very, very interesting exercise, if you guys are interested, one time we can make a workshop which is more interactive, more like last time, even without that much theory, but looking into charts of people through families. Liz Green, for example, has several books like that, where you can see in seminar situations they were looking into the charts of, say, a man and a woman who are a couple, they're married, and different issues coming up there. And then they're looking into the parents' charts of each one of those people in a marriage, and how very often they are repeating topics. For example, the grandfather of the man got married to a woman who was very a power kind of woman. One that was, we call it a Plutonian woman in astrology, that was really dominant, like everything that's going on into this family is under her command. And we have a situation where the husband is kind of the weak husband. You can see a lot of those stories in mythology. If you read myths, astrology and myths these are very, very related things, where those very strange stories of opposites or contrasts between people. A very weak husband and a very powerful wife, or the other way around. But the Neptunian families are the ones that are most likely to exhibit those patterns. And if we start following the line and looking into the planets and the different aspects in the charts of several generations, we can see so many repeating topics and ones that point to each other. And we can trace back the issue. Like sometimes there is a problem on the female side of the line, where women are repeating the same pattern. For example, they're all getting married to alcoholics. This is very, very general, very typical, but not only. And it's very difficult to say then who is the victim and who is the one to blame, because things are so mixed up that very often, if we get psychologically more into this, we can see that when whoever appears to be the victim may actually be one that holds a lot of aggression inside and is finding a suitable channel or somebody to project that to by marrying someone that is more likely to exhibit these qualities openly outside of the world and show them. So the Neptunian families are a lot more introverted, while the others were very willing to go out and play. These ones kind of like to stay at home and to not allow people to know what's going on behind closed doors. They're very protective. And introversion is stimulated. What happens if you happen to be born an extrovert in an introverted family? That's always quite problematic, because then you would feel restricted, you would feel watched, and there is a sense of not enough space. There isn't like personal space in which to breathe normally. You're always like under the command of either some sort of matriarchal figure. Usually that's the case, and that's why here the lunar myths are more common. Not examples of someone that did great and was very prominent, but rather examples of crazy aunts or drunken uncles or people who did something which we are supposed to be ashamed of or we are supposed to fear. So here a lot of fear-mongering goes into these families. And the stories that they tell each other very often revolve around how something in the past went really wrong. And there are lots of family secrets in these families which are kept there and not really shared. But they're still felt in the environment. I'll talk about these in a second. And if you are one of those people that has in the chart, say, a lot of Cancer, a lot of Taurus energies, feminine energies, ones that are more caretaking or more dependable, then you would probably feel quite good in such a family, in a Neptunian family, because it will give the right environment to nurture you. Then you will have eventually people to talk to. You wouldn't have to go out to talk to someone. Very uncommon it is for such families to search for or look for psychological help among friends or psychologists or astrologers or whatever. They rather keep their issues within the family and try to solve them there, and try to keep things very even unspoken. It is very interesting how in these families very few words are necessary. Normally they can understand each other without a lot of words. There is this intuitive, very watery type. That's why Neptune is one of the water energies in astrology, along with the moon. And then the third one is Scorpio, but this is not that related here, unless we start talking about family secrets and something a bit more dark. But usually there is something dark behind the scenes, because otherwise there won't be that instinct of those families to merge in and to close the door and not allow intruders. Sometimes they do get these intruders, like someone Iranian marries one of the members of the Neptunian family, and they come in and they kind of break the peace, and they bring in something which wasn't there before, and kind of act as a shocker energy to everyone else in the family. So there is a lot of codependence in them as well, and it's very difficult for someone raised in such a family to break away from the mold, because there is so much fear there, so much fear of, if I am left alone and if I'm just thrown away. Usually when children are ready to get out of the early family environment and start their own independent life, but they come from a Neptunian one, there is this fear of, how can we protect him or her from what is out there, and it can hurt them, or it can be a potential danger. And the person also feels a bit like this, and there is this nostalgic feeling, usually years and years after, this difficulty of separating from the nest. Nowadays it's much more difficult to live in a Neptunian family. It's just not possible to keep the balance as well as they were able to do it in the past, when people were materially so codependent, culturally so codependent. The more we can take care of ourselves and exist on our own, the less we are motivated to live in a Neptunian family, because we feel more restricted there than stimulated. But the fact is that these families have created in the world one of the most successful, say for example, prominent personalities in music, in art, in science. People that, we've probably heard, I don't have a good example at the moment at the top of my mind of, let's say, a very famous and talented composer who is famous all over the world. They have this aura of introversion around them. Let's say it's somebody a bit eccentric, doesn't mix up with people that well, but they are like a genius. And in an interview, the guy says something like, I owe it all to my mother. Or I owe it all to my family. They were so supportive, they were so in those early moments when I was feeling insecure and not sure in my talent or not sure in my abilities, they stimulated me, or she. There is very often a motherly or a woman kind of team going on in the Neptunian families, as opposite to the others, where the father or the man personality was more exemplary. But you hear the story that, thankfully, thanks to the family, they did what they did, and they were able, almost like the matrix of the family bore that talent.